Please welcome Chief Executive Officer, VMware, Pat Gelsinger.
I'm glad I have at least one fan here. This is good. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, it's a great pleasure to be here. Great pleasure to be at RSA 2019. You know, over my career, I've been here maybe 8 times or so. I know some of you have been here like 25 times, so I'm still a rookie. But it's great to be able to spend time. You know, like you, I've been following a number of the announcements that have come this week, you know, and the fantastic innovation that's coming from the event, you know, and the things that we're focused on and how we're continuing to move our industry forward. But I believe there's a much deeper reality. Collectively, we have failed our customers. More and more of humanity, of industry, of business, society, personal information, all of the things that we do are coming online, and we have not met up to the expectations of our customers. They're spending more in security, and we're having an increased rate of breaches. It is fundamentally wrong. And I don't believe we need to take incremental steps. I believe we need to make radical steps. Major steps forward, far beyond the incremental gains that we've been making. And to do that, I'd like to maybe discuss what I think are these 3 observations, provocative, that maybe allow us to step forward in a more fundamental way. The first of which I say is that the security industry has gotten so focused on security threats, and that this, in fact, is one of our greatest weaknesses, that the threat of security and this hyper-focus on addressing those threats has prevented us from really building a much more cybersecurity capability. And furthermore, we're rushing rapidly into a domain of diminishing returns. And by comparison, we believe we need to fundamentally be reducing the attack surface as opposed to chasing after the latest threat. As Ben Franklin said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You know, fundamentally, we think you can sort of break the world into these 2 boxes. One is reactive or chasing threats. And I sort of think about this like a bad attorney, right? You follow the ambulance and then you show up. Because when can you get security budget approved? Right after an attack. So that's when you show up, you know, new budget, and, you know, life is good. And what happens? You're layering on the next set of inadequate solutions versus preventative, proactive, building, hardening, patching, segmentation, some of that boring stuff. Like a good builder, you start with a great foundation. And as we, you know, think about that, you know, we look at this picture, you know, the bulk of our time, we'd estimate 80% of our time is spent on reactive, between the products, the technologies, the people, the investments. And the picture of the future ain't no better, folks, because we look to this bubbling cauldron of innovation in the venture capital community. 72% of it is spent on reactive. Fundamentally, we believe you have to turn that triangle upside down. We have to say, where do we get the greatest impact? And that's where we need to make our investments. Dollar for dollar, we need to put it where we're going to get radical returns. And if we overlay that picture with the Gartner framework, it agrees exactly. You know, they ranked all the controls to protect the workload in order of how much risk it addresses. And guess what? The green's a whole lot better than the blue. Without trying to exhaust the picture, it says exactly this picture. You know, we need to do things like segmenting applications, reorienting controls from an application's perspective, encrypting at the application level rather than at the network link. And this leads me to my second provocative observation. Application awareness lacks awareness of applications. You know, now here at RSA this week, we've probably seen 50, maybe 100 new product announcements that talk about application awareness. And the reality is, they're just protocol analyzers. They have no understanding of the application itself. And this is especially true when you think about where applications are going. Let's just take a simple example. How many of you have ever had a hard hat? You ever wear a hard hat? Right? You know, what's a hard hat supposed to do? Protect your head, right? You know, pretty simple. This is a modern hard hat, right? And with it, right? You're getting real-time information around the machineries that you're in, or the supply chain, or the factories that you're in. How many of you, when you were kids, wanted to have X-ray vision? Yeah, I know I did. I wanted to look at some things I should have known, but anyway, right? Right? But think about the application that goes behind a modern hard hat. It's a complex solution. You know, it isn't just like one protocol going over a couple of services that are talking to each other. It's a rich network of different services. Maybe a 2-decade-old database of your building code, maybe some new microservices, the new AR, VR capabilities that are going on. A complex application network. And inside of that, right, you have to say, how do I go be application-centric and understand the application by just looking at some wire protocol? Impossible. It doesn't work. This leads me to my third observation. Your most important security product won't be a security product in the future. You know, and I'd imagine, just think about this for a second. How many of you, if you were a human system, a biological system, right, do you carry around your respirator, your dialysis machine, you put yourself in a bubble to prevent viruses? No, it's built in, right? It's part of the system, and you only go to the respirator or dialysis when an emergency. All of the security systems need to be built in. This is my favorite security picture. This is the industry we have wrought. Isn't that awesome? It's a nightmare. I was meeting with the CIO of Citibank, and I said to him, Don, how many server vendors do you use? 2. How many storage vendors do you use? 2. How many networking vendors do you use? Campus, wireless, I think it's 4. How many security vendors do you use? 250. This complexity is killing us. We have an opportunity to change this picture. We've begun to shift this picture in a dramatic way, and we're in this journey. I run a large company, 25,000 people, almost 9,000 billion in revenue. We are changing our model of how we run VMware's IT. When we started in 2015, we had 75 products. We have halved it, and we're on a journey to halve it again. Our objective is to get to less than 25 security products because we're building more of the security systems into our infrastructure, into the network, into the storage systems, into the operations of our end users, building it into the infrastructure. And for us, this idea of simplifying, reducing, because how in the world do you take 250 products and keep them patched, updated, make sure, right, they're working with each other, validated with each other? Just insanity. We have to decrease that complexity. And this is our focus at VMware, is building this model where we're consistently reducing the attack surface, we're securing the applications and the data, and we're making security intrinsic. And as we think about this, it's not taking a security box, turning it into a blade and stuffing it into a router and calling it intrinsic security. That's packaged. It may be good for the sales guys, but it doesn't change your security architecture. It doesn't help you in this problem. It needs to become a distributed service that follows and is aware of the applications that it is delivering, the data and the services. Put another way, our goal is to leverage the power of the cloud in order to secure the cloud. What does this shift look like in practice? How would we go implement it at scale? Now, we are refactoring and reconsidering this basic notion of a firewall. And we all understand a firewall, largely around north-south traffic, right, at the edge, right, of your environment. But in today's multi-cloud, microservice world, there ain't no edge. There's no place to block. And it still serves a purpose, but minimally so. Let's look back at this application picture that we started at before. How do you see your infrastructure through the lens of the apps that are running on it? What we would say is we need to have known good. What is the services and the relationship of those services that form that application, the roles and the intended behaviors of each of those machines, and how they're supposed to communicate? We would then say, by that understanding, right, what are the core things that are supposed to be happening rather than the 50 million that aren't supposed to be happening. And when we understand those good behaviors, enforce known good and do it at the networking level, how they're communicating with each other, as well as at the application level. And if we do it at those two levels and we have those working with each other, we believe we've cracked the problem in a fundamental way. And as we think about what we're doing at the virtual machine level and at the software-defined networking level, we can leverage the infrastructure in a powerful way as never before. Think about the virtual machine as we launch that application. We know the DNA. We know the birth certificate of the application itself. We know what it's running, how it's provisioned, what it's supposed to be doing. And it sits outside the host. The virtual machine, right, it can't be tampered with. You can't simply turn off a virus protection, right, agent that's added into the kernel, right? It sits outside of it, but it has full knowledge of what is going on at the application level. And it's distributed. It's everywhere. And it moves with the application and the services that are running inside of it. And it learns from all the hosts. We were also building a network service that allows all of that information across all applications that are running everywhere to be working, learning, and applying that. It's a completely distributed machine learning application from birth through life and the execution of that entire environment. And we simply call that a service-defined firewall. It's a firewall reimagined, done fully in software with the considerations of an entirely distributed and complex set of apps and services. It's the firewall for the cloud era. We simply say this is enormous impact because we're dramatically reducing the attack surface. We're building a foundation that has us looking at tens or hundreds of things as opposed to billions of things. Not only does it make it easier for you to harden your surface, anybody who attempts to attack it becomes more and more difficult without exposing themselves. This is the journey that we're on, to build and deliver a software-defined, agile, machine learning infrastructure that builds that intrinsic security into the infrastructure itself, to truly build a firm foundation for a secure future. But I'd like to take a moment and hear from a practitioner and see if they agree on how this world could and should be. So it's my pleasure now to be joined on stage by Shannon Lietz. And Shannon is a practitioner's practitioner. She's lived in the trenches, a deep understanding of how modern attacks work. She's the leader of Intuit's Red Team. She's also the leader of their DevSecOps function. She's also the founder of the DevSecOps Foundation. And beyond her day-to-day responsibilities at Intuit, she's helping to chart the course for where the security industry needs to go next. Please join me in welcoming Shannon Lietz to the stage. Shannon?
Thanks, Pat.
Hey, so good to have you here with us, Shannon.
Thank you so much.
Very good. So Shannon, I sort of laid out these three provocative questions, sort of picking on everybody in the audience, making sure nobody likes me. So maybe you can join me in this. Do you sort of agree with these perspectives? Maybe starting out with this, reducing the attack surface.
Yeah, reducing attack surface is a great thing for the industry to think about. I can't agree more with a lot of the things that you guys were talking about earlier. And the vision and the mission is something I'm very spirited about. Reducing attack surface and changing the way that we're doing things is really something that's near and dear to my heart. Effectively, I remember when I was trying to reduce attack surface, and I'll tell a little bit of a story here.
Please do.
Chasing attacks at one point in my career actually was a big letdown. I remember about 8 years ago in April 2011, during a crisis when many of the great methods for security really didn't help. Effectively, I ended up sleeping on a cot for 45 days, trying
this
to
is your
make
cot,
it.
right?
That is definitely my cot. Sleeping on a cot for 45 days, and as you can imagine, that was great. I had an 18-month-old at the time. It was really disheartening. And the reason why that happened is because the great methods that we all know and love, firewalls, IDS, WAF, everybody knows those ones, right? Let me see, pen testing, all of the things that you could even imagine were applied. They got applied, and even those things weren't helpful for chasing down attacks. And I think that that's essentially one of the reasons why we have to change our approach, because when we started to put things back together, we didn't start thinking about it from a firewalling perspective or adding on security or doing those things, but essentially, how much could we actually reduce the attack surface, get down to some bare basic component parts, get to secured components, so things that were actually into the applications, and effectively get down to known paths. How could we actually reduce what an attacker was going to do? So I think, overall for me, that meant that chasing down threats was essentially a big deal.
So it fundamentally, right, didn't work. You got to spend a whole lot of days, right, sleeping out of your cot.
And somebody said chase down threats was so important, right?
So how about the second one? Focus on the apps versus the infrastructure and devices. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so. And this one was another one where, there's a lot of pain that goes into putting together security for applications. When you're doing things for infrastructure devices, securing those infrastructure devices, if you can imagine, we're going to focus all of our energy on, let me see, routers and servers and switches, but that doesn't seem to be right, because essentially we build technology now to solve for customers with applications and data. And by focusing on infrastructure, we just have the wrong frame of mind, the wrong vision, or the wrong mission as well. And I think that also creates silos and divisions in our companies that are truly disempowering, and they make it hard for us to do the right thing. Ultimately, that's led to lots of people who don't know how to come together on securing the applications and data that they have. It means that you've got developers and security working not hand in hand to be able to make adversaries go away, but essentially on the things that actually may not matter.
So that's number 2. And number 3, this idea of intrinsic, or bolted on, my favorite picture of the security landscape. What do you think?
This one breaks my heart, actually. Not because the technology isn't awesome. There's a lot of awesome technology out there. But I feel like we've gotten to a point in the industry where complexity has really become the enemy of security. And what I mean by that is, if you look at this, it's wonderful to see so many people dedicated to the mission of securing the technology that we have. But with so many boxes and so much breakup, it means that people and context can't come together. And for me, that's just a big flaming mess. And I think essentially we have to come up with a different approach. And for the DevSecOps movement, what we've really focused on is taking security features, moving them closer to developers, moving those into the developer tools and platforms, and helping security to become more intrinsic. Agents are on a sprawl at this point. There's so much complexity. If you ask a developer to go leverage one of these tools, they have to be a practitioner with lots of years of experience. And frankly, we're seeing this change not come to bear. So the one thing I would tell you that I'm really encouraged about is seeing those security features go into the developed platforms, seeing that somebody who is using one platform to be able to move their code all the way through a CI/CD pipeline is able to do it with security in tow is really something that I think is going to be a leading mission for this industry for the next 10 years. And frankly, one additional thing to keep in mind is that as we move security features into these workloads, it means that there's lots of data that we can use at our disposal to make adversaries' jobs a lot harder. So for me, the developer voice has to become triumphant, and that we need to get them to really want to see more security features at their disposal that they can use that are easier, and that we put customers, applications, and data first.
Well, so 3 provocative ideas, I think you agree with all three of them, so do you think we can pull these together and make a major step forward?
I couldn't agree more, and if I could inspire anyone here in the audience to simply take that next step forward, to look at all these solutions and to realize that they need to get built into the platforms that everybody's using to create software on a daily basis, I feel like we've got a big win that'll help to move this tide forward. I think in 10 years, we're going to see a lot more capabilities that are out there with feature sets that we've all put into these workloads. And we're going to feel really good that we've changed the next generation of computing by putting it into a more secure place. And if not for ourselves, we need to be able to do this for our children. And most importantly, I am out here because I believe that my girls deserve this.
Well, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Shannon Lietz. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Thanks so much.
So I'd suggest these 3 simple steps as calls to action as you look forward. First, it's time to flip the security model on its head. Stop chasing threats, start investing in protection. Build the house and the foundation. Move beyond the latest attack. Focus on your best minds and people and investments into reducing the attack surface. Build the foundation. Second, it's about the applications. I would say fire all of you CISOs, fire all of your security people tomorrow and hire them back after they've built an application. And every one of your apps people, have them go live in the SOC for a while. You have to make this shift, how you think about application-centric. And we believe some of the capabilities that we're announcing here, such as service-defined firewalls, we believe a radical step forward fundamentally changes how you do this. And as we said, security must become intrinsic. Set a goal to cut your security products in half. And when you've done that, do it again. And then it might be simple enough that you actually can make it operational, scale, and robust enough to change your security vector for the future. Thank you very much.